There is no such thing as a good way to get shot at. There is no universe where getting shot is a good thing, and as such, the ultimate form of cover is just not being anywhere bullets are flying. But that isn't always an option. Sometimes you have to defend yourself or your community, and while yes, it would be better to have armor, any armor you can wear would be beaten by rocks or brick walls between you and whatever is coming towards you. So, what's good cover to use? Why should you use it? How do you fight around cover? Today, we're going to cover some of the basic techniques and discuss shooting around cover. First of all, not all cover is the same. This is a fairly standard brick wall construction called a cavity wall. It's built out of bricks stacked together with cement, with an insulation layer in the middle. This is more expensive than modern construction, but it's still somewhat common. Construction is multiple layers of hard rock-like bricks layered with cement between them. Penetrating something like this would require a significant number of hits, or specific ammo designed to penetrate armored surfaces, possibly both depending on how thick the wall is and what the bricks are made out of. That also highlights a problem though. All cover is going to be different. Bricks aren't even the same thing from brick to brick. You can kind of think of bricks as man-made sedimentary rocks that are caked together, but what they're made out of and how strong they are will vacillate wildly depending on the material and the construction. And that's just one type of construction material. All buildings have a wide and varied set of options of what they can be built out of. Hell, even natural cover will not always react the same. Using a tree for cover can be a crapshoot, as the tree itself might have been hollowed out from disease or time, or even simply just not function the way that you expect something like a tree to function. Car doors are not bulletproof. People have a bad tendency to see that the door is made out of metal and assume that must mean it's solid and thick. In reality, even 9mm can punch through a car door, while 5.56 and larger calibers will basically ignore the metal parts of a door. So what do you do with a car? You have to think like a mechanic. So here's a car. You've got mostly empty space in the center here. There's not much to stop the bullet. Mostly empty space in the trunk, unless you fill it with something. And then you've got the hood and forward compartment with this big ass hunk of metal hiding behind this other big ass hunk of metal. Treat under the hood, and specifically the engine block and radiator, like cover where you can. Cover serves two purposes: the shield and the cloak. The shield part of cover is using the cover to protect yourself from potential impacts, while the cloak is covering you with the fact that it is harder to connect with a target you can't see. Obscuring your visibility to the enemy while not infinitely protecting does in fact make hitting you harder. Bullet splash and spall are complicated topics when it comes to cover. First of all, what the fuck are those? Bullet splash is what it sounds like. When a bullet hits something, it creates a splash of material. This is why we shoot at specific types of steel targets or into dirt berms, to drastically reduce the splash. Spall is a similar concept, but it's a bit more specific and is frequently used wrong or interchangeably with splash when people mean one instead of the other. Spall is when you hit a target, like a tree or a piece of steel, and the deformation on another side of the target causes material to be knocked loose and continue on to hit something, potentially you. There are a couple possibilities with this to worry about. If you are using something as cover, and your arms extend past the line of impact of the bullets, there is a chance your arms will catch some of the splash. It's better to try and engage from behind the 180-degree line of impact. The other is the rule of the wall. You'll hear this a lot in conflicts in one variety or another. Don't hug the walls, you'll catch a bullet. This isn't because the bullets magically bend around walls, but because the impacts tend to be close to 180 degrees from the line of the impacted object, and as such, standing near a wall means you can unlucky your way to catching fragments of a bullet. Spall specifically is something we have to think about when we trade in the woods, and it's why I generally avoid shooting at trees. Trees, viewed from above, are a series of concentric circles with a core, and when a bullet enters, and happens to be angled towards the core, towards that center, the pressure applied to the tree's central wood can be redirected outward from the center at basically any angle, and the result can be the tree popping spall out in random directions, including towards you. There are two main ways to shoot a pistol from cover. The first is the IPSC method. You shoot the same position that you are moving from and that you practice from. Movement is life in a fight, and being able to disengage and fully change cover is best according to this option. Keep yourself tight, use the cover as much as possible from a foot or two behind it, lean, be nimble, and be fast. The advantage with this style is you can move as fast as possible and adjust in order to the change of the fight. The disadvantage is that cover is a complicated thing, and IPSC's method has you standing back from it, which means it is far easier to accidentally expose yourself. Now the answer to that is, okay, move if you need to. This is the style that sets you up for motion, but it's worth remembering that this is more exposed than the other method we're about to discuss. The brutality style method of cover shooting is where you stabilize yourself on the cover itself. You want to expose as little of yourself as possible when shooting from cover, and part of that can be shooting one-handed braced into the cover. Not only does this guarantee nothing but what has to be is exposed, it makes sure there is a fair amount of arm meat and gun between your off switch and what you're shooting at. The advantage is that you can stabilize the gun on the cover itself and allow for more accurate shooting. Also, if the target you are engaging is not moving as much relative to your position, say they're much farther away and all motion is relatively reduced, you will remain less exposed if you stay in cover while they move. However, the opposite is true if you are engaging someone closer who is moving fast. This position requires a break, a transition back to moving and shooting from being braced, and a larger motion can expose almost as much as the IPSC technique would while slowing you from moving. I'd say between the two options, the IPSC method works best for nearby threats, and the brutality method makes the most sense when you are engaging with some distance between you and the target. Shotguns make all of this even more complicated, as what is in the tube is very much, welcome to that #1 hit TV show, Gunderson's Gargled Nuts Products presents for your enjoyment, Name That Load! Slugs are going to take a big chunk out of things like rock and sediment. Slugs will also ignore drywall and other thinner materials like car doors. Buckshot and birdshot are more complex. First of all, both of them will pattern, which means they will spread smaller pellets, which individually will have less power and therefore less chance of penetrating thin walls. More complex, physics is tricky. There is a 1 to 4 feet range immediately at the end of the barrel where disparate particles like buckshot and birdshot will react more like a slug and upon impact splatter like particles. There's also flechettes, long metal darts, which are significantly less common but will do funky things with especially drywall thinner woods. And there's even more options that seem to come from the Acme Engineering School of Development, but if we went through every shell option we'd literally be here all day, and you're not likely to see any of the others. Rule number 1 of fighting. If the enemy knows where you are, or knows where you're going to be, don't fucking be there, or you're at a disadvantage. This is true in everything from boxing to a large-scale war. Now, the rule specifically says disadvantage. This is a thing that large-scale militaries can overcome through sheer numbers and strength. You are not a large-scale military, you're trying to fight with every advantage that you can. When you're coming out from cover, the last thing you want to do is re-engage from the same point. If someone is holding that angle, you don't want to walk back into it. The fastest option is shift to a different point of the same cover. This does break the line of contact, but does also mean that your opponent is ready to aim near you, so re-engaging has to be just as fast, if not faster. Do specific lean cover from both standing and kneeling, as well as cover bracing down when you are practicing, in order to make sure you can do this in anger at the fastest speed possible. transitioning to a completely different cover might be best, but only if possible. This is highly situationally dependent, as you need to be able to get away from cover without being seen. But it does mean you get to engage the target without them knowing where you are again. What your enemy can and can't see is important information, but we're going to save that for the next episode. Concealment is its own topic with a lot of layers to it. But I hope that gives you a good grounding on how to think about cover. That's going to be it for me. I want to give a giant shout out to all of my Patreon supporters. These are the people who are coming by right here. If you want to support the channel, join us on Patreon. It is the best way to support Queer Armor. Big shout out to Violet Riley and Anthony Callio, the 2 members of my shout out gang. If you want to join and get your name shouted out, or if you want to get me to say something silly at the end of any episode, join in the shout out gang. Do that over on Patreon. That's going to be it for me. Stay dangerous, y'all. Keep each other safe. And remember, moral doesn't mean legal, and Stonewall was a fucking riot. Peace.